it doesn't count as a review if it takes longer to say it than it does to think it up. Let's talk about Four Brothers.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back. We are back. Sorry about that, guys. The Eye of the Storm podcast. So, today we're going to be doing Have You Seen? Daniel, please let the people know what the hell that is.
So this is Have You Seen, in which we talk about a movie that some of us know well and others have just seen for the first time. This week we are talking about the 2005 action crime drama film Four Brothers. So Hervé, this is one of yours. So do you want to give a brief synopsis before we get started?
Yeah, so Four Brothers follows the story of four brothers who were adopted by a woman named Evelyn in this movie. And these were troubled teens. So she, part of what she did was helped troubled kids in her community to find sort of new foster families and help them through the foster system, essentially. But there were these four teens that were extra troubled and couldn't find any foster families, so she took them in, raised them, etc. And the story kind of picks up from where she's in a convenience store and there's a robbery which goes wrong and she ends up being murdered, which brings the four brothers who have kind of gone their separate ways in their adult lives, brings them back together, back in their hometown, back where they grew up. And in that, they start to look into the murder of their mother, and they uncover a whole mystery as to why she was murdered in the first place. So with that, this is a movie that I've seen quite a few times over the years, mostly something whenever I catch it on a rerun on TV. It's always one that I vividly remember. There's like particular scenes that I always remember. So things like when they're in the house and there's like the whole gunfight that's happening outside the house. That's like one scene that I always remember from the movie for whatever reason. But I've always had fond memories of it. I've always enjoyed it anytime I've watched it. But it was interesting kind of watching it years later through a different lens, through a little bit more of a critical brain, just kind of like picking out some of the flaws in the story and some of the weaker parts of the movie. But overall, I feel like it's still a very enjoyable, very action-packed movie, and one that you can kind of just like pop in and have a good time with it. But I think, you both of you have seen it for the first time. Is that correct?
No, I've seen it.
Okay, so Daniel, this is your first time seeing it. So do you want to let the people know what you thought of the movie?
Yeah, so I saw this for the first time just a couple of days ago. So one of the things that's kind of a pet peeve of mine in movies is when bad people just do bad things for their own sake, right? Where like when the villain kicks a puppy just because it's mean, but not because it has anything to do with the character or why they're doing what they're doing, things like that. And so in movies like this, I'm always on the lookout for characters having like a theory of violence or theory of cruelty, as in why are they violent, why do they do the things they do, what are the circumstances that make them be this way, what do they hope to get from it, what's their calculation, what do they care about, all of these things. And this movie is just 2 hours of that, right? Like the entire movie is about kind of the purpose of violence, right? And but in a not it's not purely out of greed, it's not purely because people are bad, it's because they want to build something for themselves and for the people they care about. And their way of doing this is through violence, right? So you've got your corrupt police, like police officers, you've got your gang members, you've got like everything in between. And this movie, I think, is very smart about why these kinds of dynamics exist. And so I, like in the first few scenes where they show up to the funeral and like where Evelyn is killed and then the sons start showing up to the funeral, it looked like a pretty well made movie. And then over the next 10-15 minutes, it started to become clear that this movie is about violence and the purpose of violence in this kind of environment. And that's when I got really interested. And then it doesn't stop for 2 hours, right? Like every character in this is in some way a reaction to the environment they live in and the options they have and the strategies that they have. And there's always a logic to the violence, right? Whenever they interrogate somebody, whenever they threaten somebody, whenever they kill somebody, there's always a reason for it. That I thought was really interesting.
And Jonathan, your thoughts as a recap?
Yeah, overall, I like this movie. It was good watching it again. I just think that for me personally, what got me into it was just the premise. Even though it is cliche, I do think it's good cliche. There's just certain things which I can just watch repeatedly over and over again, and I think this was one of them. And just kind of having like, I think there's always like to like interracial relationships amongst friends, brothers. So see, this was interesting because you had different, even though they were brothers, they were three like different perspectives. I wouldn't say different perspectives, but like different cultures in a way. Even though they were a bit similar, but you could still sort of tell that they were different in cultures and kind of seeing that come together. I feel like they worked very well, especially when it comes to like their performances. So I think overall for me, I enjoyed it. Of course, like I said, it was cliche. I do think the plot was pretty predictable, but besides that, I just think it was like a nice, good, fun movie that you would add to your like movie marathon list or like a movie night.
So I guess first question is mainly around the premise of the movie. So of course, this movie is called Four Brothers, and these are a bunch of troubled boys that have kind of come together and are almost like a found family under Evelyn, where she's taking them all in from their different walks of life. And this movie does its part to try to sell you on the idea that these are four separate brothers that have come together. I guess first question is, do you buy into the idea that they were brothers? Do you buy into sort of the idea that they had come together, drifted apart, and were kind of like rediscovering themselves? And also, how do you feel like that served the purpose or served the narrative of the movie?
So I absolutely bought that this was a family, and whenever they are together in a room just interacting as brothers, I absolutely bought it, and I thought the movie was really elevated by the dynamic between them. And you called them found family just a minute ago, and I don't think they are. I think they're just family because they grew up with each other and they have no memory of any other family, right? Like found family is when the people you meet in life become your family because you have more in common with them and you feel more kinship with them than you do the people who you happen to be related to. And here they're not biologically related, but they grew up in the same household with the same mother. They have a lifetime of shared experiences, and so I think they are genuine family. And I think that movie absolutely lives from that, because that also underpins all of their motivations, right? Like pretty much everything people do in this movie is for family.
Yeah, I agree. The only thing that I thought was I didn't really think there was that much character development. I think they pretty much, I wouldn't say stayed, actually kind of in a way. I would say I feel like the way that they started and the way that it ended, yeah, there was some sort of growth, but it still felt like they were still, I wouldn't say they were all children, but it still felt like they were the same. It's so hard to explain. But I think when it comes to character development, that for me wasn't necessarily the issue. I just didn't think there was much growth. And obviously one of them, well, in spoilers, like we can do spoilers, I'm guessing, but one of them died. So I don't really think he had that much time for any growth. And the other three, yeah, I feel like they kind of started the way that they ended. You could tell one was the mature one. When I say the mature one, I'm saying the one with the family. One was pretty much still like, I wouldn't say bad boy, but he's got his girlfriend, Hispanic girlfriend. I say Hispanic girlfriend because I think the other guy, no, he didn't have, the other brother didn't have a Hispanic girlfriend, so apologies. But yeah, so one obviously Tyrese, his character was pretty much like the playboy in a way, still kind of childish but still mature in a way, and he ended like that. And then obviously you got the Mark's character. I don't know what the age difference was, but he felt like he was like the older brother in a way. But didn't really see much change. Of course, at the end, he's kind of like I said, he's like the elder of them all. But besides that, they didn't really see him that much change. Sorry, I'm waffling a bit, but I'm just trying to kind of like see if there was like, I'm trying to see in any point of the movie where the growth was, and I don't think there was much personally. So, but yeah,
I
that's
think
the only issue. But yeah, so carry on.
I think I agree with you with that in the sense that the whole premise of this movie was this woman that was so all about her community and all about helping people that from troubled backgrounds. And of course, she worked in placing a lot of troubled kids and troubled teenagers in foster families so that they can have a better upbringing and have sort of better opportunities. And of course, these are the four boys that she brought in and she helped raise and she helped to guide. But it didn't feel like much of her goodness or much of her teachings were really present in them. It just kind of felt like they were just like they grew up troubled and they kind of maintained trouble, and they were getting caught up in all types of violence and all types of problems, of course in her name, but it's everything that she probably didn't want, and it was everything that she was completely against. So it didn't feel like there was that level of growth. I think is what you're probably trying to get at in terms of realizing what she stood for and realizing what she meant and trying to exact or like try to sort of grow from that essentially, or sort of realize that by the end of the movie.
The movie's not focused all around a character arc, right? Like there isn't like a big journey that any of the characters go on. I think this is more about this is a family defending itself, right? So the movie starts and ends kind of the family coming together to help each other out, right? And in the beginning, it's the funeral, and in the end, they're rebuilding the house, right? And in between, you have all this carnage where they kind of together go after the people who are threatening them and who threatened their mother, right? And in between, I think there are moments of growth, right? So when Jerry has this whole thing about kind of double crossing this gangster, who is it? Is it Victor, right?
Victor, I think.
So like that is something like when he kind of gets kind of back in touch with his union roots, which again is people banding together for a common cause, right? Like which is similar to a family in a way. Like families, gangs, unions, like these are all people with shared interests coming together to pursue those interests, like in a very high level abstract way, right? And they do this, and they support each other, and they go after anybody who threatens one of their own, right? And like it's kind of different versions of the same thing, right? And then it kind of turns out that Jerry has been kind of what was it? He was paying the mother's life insurance, something like that, and then he gets a big payout, which he then uses to save his business. And his brothers didn't know this about him, and so they learn something about him, and it changes how they see him. So I do think there's stuff going on here. It is not simply they go on a killing spree for 2 hours and it's sandwiched by family. There are moments in here where characters learn things about each other, and it's how the brothers view each other that kind of really underpins all of this, and that changes over the course of the movie.
But I think for me, anyways, I feel like those moments are very few and far, and I feel like Jeremiah in this movie was definitely a lot different to his brothers, and definitely had, different kind of like moments and reactions to certain things. But for example, what's his name? Like Bobby, just kind of felt like he was one note and the same throughout. He was very like hot-headed, very aggressive, very brash, and the way that he was speaking to people and the way that he handled everything. And kind of like likewise with Jack and Angel as well. I don't really, it didn't really feel like I was getting much from there. And the reason I even brought it up in the first place was the whole premise of the movie is about four brothers, and it's about, the boys that grew up together. And it just kind of felt like it didn't do enough with the idea that it implemented in the movie. And again, it doesn't always have to, but it's like for me anyways, it's like if you were going to go down that route, and if you're going to go down the idea that you have this woman that's trying to do so much good in the community, and she's brought these boys together to become a family, it just needed to have a little bit more impact on the story. Not to say that it doesn't have impact on the story, but it just needed to feed the character development a little bit more than it did in this movie. Because again, for me, it just felt very few and far some of the moments. So, like for example, like Bobby, when you're first introduced to him, he's clearly kind of like the leader of the group. He's very harsh in the way that he talks, and that just kind of carries throughout the whole movie when he's like interrupts a basketball game, when he's interrogating people, even down to like the final fight. He's just like pretty much the same for me.
Yeah, I'm not sure what it should have done, because to me, we're watching a family act together, right? And I'm not sure what else it should have done, right? I think we get 3 scenes where they kind of remember Evelyn's influence on them, right? Like one of them is at the Thanksgiving dinner scene, where each of them kind of remembers something she told them, and how, like, it's small things like get your elbows off the table, or don't chew with your mouth open, like, but it's like stuff like this, right? It's like stuff like examples of her caring, right? And her trying to get them to do things properly, right? And then there's another one, I think Bobby at one point, I think it's at the end, when he goes back to the house, he briefly has a vision of her, right, where she basically tells him that he's doing all right, or something to that effect, right? And there was another scene that I don't remember right now, but like you said earlier, like they're still criminals in some way, right? And I think Jeremiah is the one who has gone straight, like the only one who really has gone straight, right? At the very, very beginning in the funeral scene, like the cop asks Bobby if he's gone straight, and he says straight-ish, right? And everybody, like all of them kind of have like a checkered past, and none of them have fully left it behind, but they all have tried to different degrees, right? But I'm not sure that that was kind of the win condition in a way. Like, it's not like Evelyn failed because they are not model citizens, right? Or she didn't fail because they're still criminals or have criminal records or have a criminal past, or however you want to slice it. I don't know. I think she did what she could to make them decent people, and she at least succeeded on the level of they care about each other. Like they never. I don't think they ever really hurt each other in a way, right? They hurt everybody else because everybody else is a threat to them and an outsider. But she got these four people to care about each other and view each other as brothers.
Speaking of hurting, there was one scene which was good, but at the same time, there was no indication. Actually, that's a lie. But I just didn't. I thought they were kind of gonna go more into not detail, but they were gonna kind of go into it more. I'm talking about the scene, the car chase scene, where Bobby and Tyrese's character, and they were with the younger brother, I believe, where they killed the guys that they were chasing. I didn't know, like, even though they were violent and they were like, kind of like, you could tell that they were militant around their neighborhood, I still didn't get that feeling that they were killers. So when that happened, I was like, oh, okay, this felt like a deep moment that they might kind of like go into. Like, maybe there's like a little comment that, it speaks, like someone will speak on their past about, their first kill or something, because I just didn't get that vibe that they were killers. How did you guys feel about that film, about that, the first kill that we saw them do? Was that something which you thought that was right and it was expected? Or because I knew someone was gonna die, I knew maybe they were gonna kill someone, but I thought it was gonna be more of like a build up, like in terms of like that happening, and we were gonna see more in terms of their character of just kind of like knowing, not even knowing, but just, yeah, just back to what I'm saying, just like, just a bit of a revelation in terms of their story, in terms of their first kill, etc., etc. I feel that it felt like they didn't really do nothing with that, which I feel like they should have.
Well, it's clear that they are violent and that they have in various forms of a criminal past, right?
Yeah.
So, like, and I don't remember like where exactly in the movie this happens, so I'm not sure what happens before it and after it. But like, they've been violent the entire time, right? They throw a guy out of the window and basically threaten to let him die there if he doesn't give them the information,
Yeah, but
right? For
these are
example,
all, yeah, but these are all like bluffs in a way. Because that's what I'm saying. Like,
sure.
a lot of people bluff, like especially like a lot of people in those type of areas, they bluff and they do things that will obviously threaten someone with death, but deep down you can tell that they're not like, they don't really want to kill that person. And that's kind of like the vibes that I was getting from them. So that when they finally did it, and obviously it was a reasonable why they're doing it, obviously they're doing it to avenge their mother 100%. But I just didn't know that they had the heart to do that. And if they did have the heart to do that, I kind of wanted to know if that was their first kill or have they killed people before, and like what's the story behind that. That's kind of like where I'm going at with my point. So if you got the feeling that, okay, they've probably killed someone before, they had the heart to do it, then hey, then fair enough. That's sort of what you thought. But for me, I just didn't think that. I just didn't feel like they were killers.
I just felt like that is their background. They've been doing this their entire lives. Like, that's the kind of the environment they grew up in, and that is the kind of past they have. And I think, if I remember correctly, those were also the hitmen that were after them, right? That they shot. So it's not like they just went after some random people. I think throughout the movie they are very deliberate in terms of how violent they are and how much violence they use. When they crash this basketball game, they kind of put on a tough guy act, but they're not really hurting anybody. And there's this one guy who I think is the brother of the guy who saw the killing, right? And they kind of rough him up, but they don't hurt him. They just intimidate him. And so they always use as much violence as they need. And if there's hitmen chasing you in a car and they've been shooting at you, the only way, to come out of that alive is to kill them. So
No,
I think
they were chasing the hitman that killed Evelyn.
I think the hitmen come to their house and then they drive away and then they chase after them, right? Is that right? There was one. No, was that a different scene?
No, that's a different scene. So this one is when after they've spoken to the brother and they've got the description of who the hitmen were, they go to the bar where the hitmen are at, and then the hitmen recognize them, and then they kind of have like a brief sort of exchange of gunfire in the bar. The hitmen get in the car, and then they chase the hitmen down and eventually kill them.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, that's right. But people, like both sides have been shooting each other at that point. So just like a stern talking to is out of the question at that point.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. I kind of agree with Jonathan a little bit on that one. Just mainly again because of like their background and because of the influence that Evelyn had on them. To me, it didn't seem like they had that in them to. Well, the movie does show that they are, extremely violent and use unnecessary force. But I think there was like a comment that was made by one of the police officers at the start of the movie where he says like, "Oh, they're kind of bad, but you can consider them like congressmen based on some of the upbringing they had compared to what they would have had, what they would have been, or what they would have turned out to be if they didn't have Evelyn in their life." So that kind of speaks to that. Yeah, they were tough, and yeah, they were bad, and yeah, they sort of had a bit of a checkered past, but it didn't quite seem like it stretched to the extent of killing people. But again, this movie's kind of all about the action. There's a lot of crazy action that happens in this, so I kind of understand why in this particular movie it played out the way that it played out. But I think in a movie that was exploring its themes and its topics a little bit more, it probably would have dwelled on that a little bit longer. They probably would have wrestled with the idea a little bit more about whether this was like their first kill or whether it's like something that they had done before.
Because when they even shot the guys, wasn't the little brother there? Because I swear the little brother was there, right? And then he was shocked in a way. Like he had a moment of like, oh.
Yeah, he had like a look in his face of like shock and like what the hell just happened. Even though they didn't
So that kind of like, even that with me, I was like, that implied that, oh, okay, like that's maybe his first time seeing them kill someone, and that was a shock to him. So that's why I was like, oh, that was a shock to me as well. And that's why I thought they were kind of gonna like maybe even just like a little dialogue scene where they have a conversation and they just and you might even say the first time. I remember the first time I killed someone. I don't want it to be too corny or cliche, but just something that gives us because they did it and then went on to killing more people. I'm thinking, oh, okay, so we're not gonna kind of like talk about the in between from being just guys that are kind of bluffing, but I like Daniel says using as much violence as needed, all the way to straight murdering guys. You know what I'm saying? So it was just that gap that I wanted them to kind of like fill with just a little dialogue scene. It was something that tells them, yeah, just a little backstory.
We get an outright exposition scene, right, where they arrive at the funeral one by one, and the cops explain to each other just how bad they are, right? So we are getting, like, I do think it is woven into the dialogue that we can kind of get an idea about what kind of past each of them had, and that kind of relates to what they do.
Kind of moving on from that, how did you feel about how the plot unfolded and the mystery behind who was behind the killings and why she ended up dying in this movie?
So I do think the movie repeats itself a little bit too often. So, like, especially in the middle, I thought it dragged quite a bit where I kind of made similar points. But like, I think you could streamline the plot by taking one or two steps out. I think I'm not sure which ones, but it seems more complex than it needs to, and there seem to be more escalations than there need to. And I think that is kind of my big criticism of the movie, is that once we get to the finale, it kind of all makes sense, and like the movie's making its point, but it's kind of like the way it takes to get there, I think, is too long.
Me, I don't have an issue with it. Like I said, it was predictable, but at the same, well, not the reason why they killed the mom. That wasn't predictable. But in terms of like, obviously knowing who's behind it and stuff, yeah, that was pretty predictable. But yeah, I didn't have an issue with it. Like I said, I'm a fan of these, type of plots and premises. So I don't think I would have had an issue with it if it was like proper do. Then yeah, but I don't think this was do. I think it was like, oh, okay, that makes sense. Crime boss or whatever, just trying to quiet a witness in a way. So I was like, okay, I'm cool with that. And at the same time, it does add more like an emotional engagement in a way, because it's like, damn, like the brother was responsible for the mom dying.
Yeah, no, I get you. One other thing I wanted to go back to, Daniel, was the point that you made about violence and how it's kind of like an exploration of violence to various degrees in this movie. I think you kind of briefly touched on it. Do you want to expand on that a little bit more and sort of kind of explain to people sort of this theme that you found within the movie?
So, like, it is essentially in almost every scene, right, where people are doing violent things, but they're doing so deliberately, and they're doing it kind of for a purpose. And that purpose is usually to get something, or to prevent somebody else from doing something, right? Which is like a high level way of saying the like you can always tell why they're doing what they're doing is what I'm trying to say. So one example of this is how targeted people are in their violence, right? Like they were like there's so many scenes where like family members kind of know to get out of the way when violence is about to happen, right? So this happens like in the bowling alley where Bobby confronts one of the, like I remember who it was, right? But like there's this big breach of etiquette that he does it at the bowling alley where there's families around and where his children are around, right? And the guy is furious with Bobby that he would do this, right? So there's very clearly an implied etiquette of there's a certain way you do this, and there's a purpose to it. And Bobby is like the brothers in general, but Bobby specifically are breaking the rules by bringing this into kind of the family sphere, right? And there's another one where the congressman and Victor. So the congressman goes to Victor's house, right? And I remember exactly what he's trying to achieve. But there's this scene where he makes him sit at the kids' table, and then when he's ready to talk to him, the family kind of gets out of the way. Like I think they go to another room. So there's like a bunch of different ways in which like nobody ever targets the family, I don't think, until the big shootout at the house, right? Where they just go after the entire Mercer family, right? With everybody in the house. And then there's another scene where Victor orders the hit on Evelyn, and he specifically says hire shooters from out of town because it's harder to trace. And then his underlings screw up and hire local shooters, and that is what gets the police on his trail. And in order to take revenge, he shows up at this restaurant where his underling kind of disrespects him and kind of doesn't fully acknowledge his mistake. And so he drops the food on the ground and makes him and his wife or girlfriend eat the food off the floor, right? As a power move, right? And it's not simply sadism. It's not simply, being mean. It is about like demonstrating power, and it's about like it's a proportional use of punishment in a way, right? None of that kind of justifies, none of it makes it good, but it's all deliberate and it's all specific to the situation. That's what I'm trying to say. And the movie, I think, is very thoughtful and very deliberate about this, where anytime, like in almost all cases, there's maybe one or two exceptions, but in almost every scene when somebody uses violence, it's strategic. It's to achieve a goal, and it's tailored to the situation. Like nobody is just being cruel for the sake of being cruel or evil for the sake of being evil. It's all very deliberate and strategic.
Yeah, no, I can definitely agree with that. Yeah, I don't think I've got any arguments against that, because any example you think of in the movie, again, like you're saying, there's clear objectives and there's clear, what they're trying to get out of the situation, or what they're trying to protect as well in that situation, no matter which side of violence you're on. So I think that was like a good observation that I didn't pick out at all when watching the movie. So I think fun one for the people who are listening.
And there are many movies that do this, right? Like any good mafia movie will also do this, right? Where it's all about sending messages and making threats and drawing lines and all of that, right? It's not simply let's go destroy something. It's about making other people respect you, right? Like that's ultimately like the main overarching goal, and getting people to do what you want them to do and what you need them to do, right? So I think it's just that many movies get this wrong because they just think, oh, bad people are just bad, and so they'll just be cruel for the sake of cruel. I've got a Rebel Moon comparison, right? Like all the way back a year and a half ago, when we talked about the first Rebel Moon movie, there's a scene in that movie where the evil empire is chillingly polite when it comes to treating like some farmers, right? And then randomly they will just lash out with extreme violence. And it's not simply about intimidation. It's not simply about sending a message. It's not simply about showing who's in charge. They're just bad people, and that is why they do bad things. And so that is an example where kind of the violence is kind of random, which could have a method by like random violence by itself can have a method as well, right? It's just purely about pushing other people around that can have purpose too. But in a lot of the movies like this, the bad people just do bad things because they're bad people. And so I really perked up when I saw this movie and saw how on purpose the violence was. And like it's not the only movie that does this. It's not the best movie or it's not the best version of this, but it is very firmly baked into everything that happens in this movie.
And you can even see it in some of the biggest movies as well. So I know that there was, or you also highlighted in Dune Part Two, where Fade Robin, if I remember his name correctly, had just like those like random outbursts of violence to his subordinates, and it was just like the idea of like how does that breed loyalty and how does that breed respect to you if you're just killing people at random. And even in this movie, where Victor Sweet kind of exercises his power a little bit too far, and I don't think there's like many examples of him being super cruel or super rude to his subordinates. And actually, if you're in a criminal setting, you can almost justify what he did, even though it was probably a little bit too far. But you can understand the rage that he had because he gave them a simple task and they did it wrong, and someone needed to be punished for it. But even in this movie, when they're handling the element of violence correctly in terms of it not just being random, there were still consequences to it, and there's still the ramifications of it, and it's felt in different parts of the movie. So I mean, for Victor Sweet, it ended up in his comeuppance where his subordinates essentially flipped on him because they didn't like the way that he was treating them, didn't like the way that he was handling them, and almost kind of contradicts the four brothers because obviously they came together, cared about each other, had each other's backs, and would do anything for each other. Whereas him, he kind of just like treated everyone as if they were beneath him, and that didn't breed the loyalty that was required for him. And even in Jack's case, again, it's like you understand like the violence, you kind of understand why they're pushing the boat with some of the violence that they're doing and why they end up killing the hitman. But then it also still has consequences where Jack is then caught out in this situation that they find themselves in and is essentially killed. So it's not all violence just for violence sake. There is reasons for it, and there's also consequences for it as well in the movie.
Yeah, the Dune thing is like the thing about the Harkonnen there is that in Dune, every faction has kind of a theory of power and authority, and there's like a method to what they're doing, and the Harkonnen are just the bad guys in some way, right? Like I left this story pretty much in every other way, but it's really a matter of why is anybody loyal to them, right? If they will just randomly kill you just for standing there, right? That's a whole other conversation. But like to bring this back to Victor, like you said, like it does not really instill loyalty in him. Like nobody will sacrifice anything for him. But at the same time, like when they openly defied his instructions, he had to send a message, right? And it wasn't so much about punishing that one guy who, like, he not only got his order wrong, he also ate while he was talking, right? So, like in a like from Victor's point of view, he had to assert his dominance and his status, and humiliating this one guy by making him eat off the floor was not so much about punishing that guy. It was about showing to everybody else this is what happens to you if you do the same thing. So obey me or else, right? So there was a purpose to it, and it was also proportional. Like he didn't shoot the guy, right? He could have probably gotten away with it, but he kind of just humiliated him. And the same thing with the congressman, right? Where he makes him sit at the kids' table, and like on paper the guy is more powerful than him, but he has to do what Victor says. And he's embarrassed and he's humiliated, and he does it anyway. And I think the children even ask him, like, did you do something bad or something? I said, yeah, I did. You know what I mean? Like, he has no choice, right? So it's a pure power move, but it's a way to, like, it's a way for Victor. Like, this is how the rules are. Like, this is how it works. And it works in that kind of environment.
Any other positives that you had coming out of the movie?
I think it's a well put together film. I think the pacing was good. It kind of moves quickly. Each moment kind of moves quickly, so it kind of doesn't like dwell on a moment for me and drags that out. I think even though they're like Daniel did, I did agree with there was some moments where it was kind of like repeated, but I think just in terms of just the pacing of the whole film, it was good. And like I said, memorable performances. I think that's kind of like the highlight of the film is how 4 different characters come into unison. So overall, I think it was good. And yeah, like I said, the performances is definitely something which I got out of it, which was kind of like my highlight.
So I think it's just a really well-made movie, right? It just looks good. It's well directed. It's well acted. The dialogue is tight, right? like there is not a lot of wasting time. I just think there are too many steps to the plot. But like Jonathan, like you said, each individual step is really good, right? I don't think there's a scene in this where I say, "Oh, this is just terrible." Like this is now you're just spinning wheels for 10 minutes. Like a lot of movies will kind of have a really strong beginning, a really strong ending, and then in between it's kind of a shapeless mess. A lot of in many movies, even good ones, where they don't really have an idea how to get from A to B. They kind of flail around for 45 minutes. And then they go back on track because that's the ending that they had in mind. And here I think each individual scene is quite strong. Like everything from the dialogue to how it's shot to the characterization, all of it is I think is really strong. So that's kind of why I'm struggling to kind of point towards a specific thing that's really good, because it's just good, right? Like the performances are good. I like these characters. I want to go on a journey with them. I watch them kind of figure this out and kind of learn things about each other and about their mother that they didn't know before, and they react to it, and it's kind of that kind of thing. And it kind of lives from the way in which they just play off each other. And that isn't like there's a lot of lines in this that are quotable, but it's not so much about individual moments or individual scenes. It's more like I believe that these four characters are real and that they're brothers and they care about each other and that they're going on this journey together, but they also have friction between them. And I think that is kind of the dynamic that holds it all together. And it's not so much about specific scenes.
And then I was just going to ask about, because I know you mentioned that it was flawed at the top of this. I think for me, the biggest thing which I feel like the movie could have done better was just explore the whole theme of, growing up in the system, growing up in foster homes, growing up in a home that isn't yours and being raised by people that aren't, your biological family and around, all of that. And the reason I say that is this is also directed by John Singleton, who did Boys in the Hood. If you remember, we did that a couple of weeks ago. And that one was like really rich in its exploration of growing up in LA in the 1980s and just like what life was like and just like really bringing to light that environment and the people that lived within that environment. And I feel like this one, it's there, but it just didn't hit the sort of heights that I wanted it to, or it didn't really sort of dig deep in that area as much as I wanted it to. But that's kind of like my sort of one flaw with the movie. But did you guys have any other flaws or any other issues with the movie where you felt like maybe they could have done this a little bit better, or maybe they could have done something that would have elevated it from being just good to actually a great movie?
So this whole thing about growing up in the foster care system, I think that's not explored because it's not the point, and it's actually the opposite of the point. Like throughout the movie, they make it very clear that they are not simply raised by the same person, and they don't view themselves as foster family, they view themselves as family, right? And there's a whole bunch of different ways in which this is reinforced. Like one scene that I actually kind of liked was when they show up at the funeral. Bobby meets his niece, like a 6-year-old niece or something, for the first time. I think it's Jerry's daughter, right? Who he has not met before, I think. And she's confused because why is this white guy calling himself her uncle, right? And he explains, well, there's more than one kind of uncle and, and so on, right? But in his mind, they really are brothers and she really is his niece. Like he's not just being polite. He's not just doing it out of obligation. This is actually the case.
Yeah. And I completely get you on that, where I don't think this movie was about some of the kind of foster system and that. And I do believe that it was kind of them really believing that they were a family, but it's just the like the idea and the premise of it, of like Evelyn wanting to help all these people and like helping these people through the foster system, and knowing the director and knowing how much of an issue that can be for some of the troubled teens. I just kind of thought it might be looked at a little bit more, especially that these were the worst of the worst that couldn't find anyone, and then she had to take them in herself. But I do agree with you. I don't think that was the movie's aim at all. But it's just maybe like a selfish gripe where I kind of wish that it was included or was woven into the story somehow.
Yeah, and I think there's more examples as well, right? So that's the scene where they shake down the guy who's the brother of the guy who is witness to to Evelyn's murder, right? And he's confused about why are they calling each other brother. and they kind of make him accept that they are in fact brothers, right? That's another one where the environment doesn't want to accept that they are family, but they keep insisting that they're family, and they keep forcing everybody else to accept that they're family, right? And then the other example I had in mind was when they are at the reading of the will, and there's this lockbox, and they kind of divide up Evelyn's possessions. She kept like their adoption papers and like birth certificates and stuff like that, and that is the first time they saw those documents, right? Like one of them said, "Oh, I'm actually from Detroit. I never knew." Right? And another guy finds out that his mother like gave him up because she was 16 and couldn't raise him, and he had no idea. Right? So their old families and their old lives before they came to Evelyn does not exist for them. And then when they find out, it doesn't matter. It's trivia. Right? It's interesting, all else being equal, they would like to know, but it's not important to them. It doesn't, like, once they know this, it doesn't change who they are as a person. It's a bit like back when like DNA tests were all the rage, and like 6 or 7 years ago, people would do like 23andMe or my ancestry or all these different companies, and they would make YouTube videos kind of reacting to the results. And sometimes people would have existential crises because the test didn't say what they thought it would say, right? And it kind of changed their their self-image and their sense of identity. But it didn't actually change who they were. Like, it didn't change their life experiences. It didn't change any of their connections to anybody else, their parents or anybody else. You know what I mean? Like, I did a test like this, and it's got some things in it that's a little bit surprising. Like, there's like evidence that like around 1850, like a Swedish sailor had a very successful shore leave. That's kind of implied by my results, right? But doesn't matter, right? I'm not Swedish because of this, right? Like, there are people who would after that call themselves Swedish in that example, right? Because their DNA test came back 5% Swedish. And my attitude is, no, it's like, this is trivia. It's not important. It doesn't change, your life experience doesn't change how you relate to other people. Similarly, when they find out who their biological parents are, it's nothing, right? Like, they take a note of it and they move on, and they never mention it again, because Evelyn was their mother, and these four guys are their brothers. And I think that is the point, right? It's not simply a mistake that like this is not dealt with. This is not like the guy didn't forget to put this in the movie. Like, he goes out of his way to make the point that this is a real family. One other thing, I have one more thing to bring up. So one thing that like I had not heard of this movie before I sat down to see this, and like I have no idea what its reputation is. I have no idea like what people say about it. Like, as I was just watching it, going in completely cold, I was kind of a little bit blown away, because I think it's just a really solidly made movie. And then I went onto things like Rotten Tomatoes and looked at some opinions, and I was actually a little bit taken aback by how negative it is. So on Rotten Tomatoes, like the audience score is 80%, so people generally like this, but critics is 53%, which should indicate a pretty bad movie, right? Like, if only half of critics say, yeah, this is okay, like okay or better, then that's usually not a good sign, right? And 50% often means it's very polarizing, where half people really like and half people really hate it. But when you look into the negative reviews, it's basically just saying, oh, this is trash. Like, this is just juvenile, like, nonsense. It doesn't mean any, like, it doesn't say anything. It's just pure violence for its own sake. It's just, things like that. And I was really surprised by that. Hervé, specifically, like, you've seen this movie a bunch of times. You've presumably heard people talk about it or talk to people about it. Is that kind of how it is? Like, is this really like a not well liked movie?
I actually haven't spoken to many people about this movie, to be honest, and I didn't know what the Rotten Tomatoes was of this movie. It was just a movie that I'd known, that I'd seen several times. I don't even know if I watched it with family or not. It's kind of like, my memory is terrible, by the way. I've got goldfish memory. So I don't really recall watching it with anyone. It's just like a movie that I had watched in the past that really stuck with me. And again, it's just like, it's one of those ones where it's like, anytime it's on a rerun, I can't help but like keep it on and watch it, just because I'm enjoying myself with the movie, and it just kind of like harkens back to a time when I was like a little bit younger and watching these movies just in the front room or whatever. So I never really knew the conversation around this movie. So when we kind of first discussed doing this movie and after the Rotten Tomatoes, I was shocked that it was at 53%. I was like, and this is before I had rewatched it recently, so I was a little bit shocked as to why it was at 53%. Having rewatched it, I can understand why some people may not like it, because I think there is a lot of action in this. There's a lot of, you know, like I said, like car chases. There's a whole shootout outside of the house, and I do think it kind of stretches some of the believability of, you know, what's really possible and how things would actually play out. But I think if you can look past all of that, I think there's again like a really solid movie in this, which I think we've all come to an agreement on. So yeah, I don't know where I don't know where the 53% comes from, but I can understand why some people maybe turn off with the movie. But yeah, I think 53% seems a little bit low for me, anyways.
Yeah, a lot of people I think just don't like the whole like macho kind of attitude that kind of goes into a lot of these characters. But I think it's not so much like this is not a Michael Bay movie, right? Where kind of the attitude of the director kind of bleeds into that kind of thing. I think it's very deliberately chosen to say, okay, this is this kind of environment, this is the kind of person this environment produces, which just makes it kind of a interesting companion to Boys in the Hood. Like, these are not the same movie, and this is not does not have the same ethos or philosophy or message at all, but it's kind of similar a little bit, right? Because it's like people being shaped by their environments. Like, I don't know this guy's other filmography, but this is kind of what it seems to be, right? These are two different versions of the idea of this is what happens when people's lives are governed by their environment and they don't have many options. They're kind of just dealing with it in the best way they can, and some people deal with it better than others. Like, if I had to summarize those two movies, which are the only ones I think of his I've seen, that's kind of how I would do it.
I just checked. I didn't know actually he did Too Fast, Too Furious. So I don't know if you've watched that, but he did do Too Fast, Too Furious as well.
I have a feeling that kind of breaks my theory, so let's not watch that.
But he actually has a very interesting filmography. He actually has, and I didn't really realize this, he has a lot of classic, what seem to be kind of like black classic films. So he's also done, you know, things like Baby Boy, Poetic Justice. He's done Shaft as well. He actually did the Michael Jackson Remember the Time music video as well, which is, you know, whatever. And he's also got Beverly Hills Cops in there as well. So it's kind of like a mix of things. But like, I mean, there's a couple in there that I actually haven't watched, like Poetic Justice and Baby Boy, which is a bit of a sin in the black community. So I definitely need to check those out. But it's very interesting that he put out so many movies that are deemed as cult classics in the black community. So definitely worth checking out some more of his and just kind of exploring more the way that he handles filmmaking.
Yeah, and there's definitely stuff in here, right? Like, we've got talked about family, we've got talked about justice, we've talked about authority, right? These are all ideas that are in this. And so I just don't get how somebody can watch this and say, well, this is just dude bros shooting guns for 2 hours, right? Like, nothing to it. Like, one review says, feels like a nervous student's heavily footnoted thesis film. Another says, Singleton, bereft of serious ideas, now appears to have nothing more to offer than plenty of bang for your buck, essentially saying this is dumb action. This is not dumb action. This is very intentional. This is, in fact, saying stuff. And I think it's, like, this is kind of why I don't listen to critics. Like, I find them to have negative value when it comes to assessing what a movie is like and trying to understand a movie in almost all cases, because, like, they will say stuff like this, right? Like, no matter how much you dislike the movie or like this kind of movie or the feel of this movie or what this movie has to say, you cannot objectively look at this and say it has nothing to say. It's saying plenty of things. You cannot like it, you can be unconvinced, but it's there. And so for so many critics, like not all negative reviews are like along those lines, but a lot of them are. So let's call it 30 to 40% of critics to just say, oh, this is just junk. It's just a glorified Michael Bay movie, like with just a bunch of explosions and gunfights, and that's it. Like, there are many movies like this, and this is not one of them. So like this has really reinforced my dislike for like professional critics, because they should be helping you understand a movie, or at least understand what kind of movie it is and like what this movie is doing and whether it's worth watching or whatever. And this is just outright disinformation. Like, it's outright incorrect. And that is weird. Like, this is not the only movie where this has happened, but it's like really jarring, because like this is not I wouldn't call this a masterpiece. I would just call it a really solid movie. And even a movie that does not quite deliver on what it attempts to do, you can still see what it does attempt to do. And there's just no way you can honestly look at this and say this doesn't attempt anything.
Well, all right, guys. Thank you very much for tuning into today's discussion. Hervé, please do the honors.
If you reach this part of the episode, of course, we appreciate your support and we appreciate you rocking with us. As always, if you liked what you heard today and you enjoyed our discussion, you should probably tell a friend. And if you hated everything and you thought we were chatting a bunch of nonsense, you should probably tell an enemy. We are the Eye of the Storm podcast.
All right, guys, you heard it here first. We'll catch you next time. Au revoir.
Ciao.
Bye bye.